ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for watching the show. This is your Top Think Tanks review, and I'm your host, Bryce Dolan. Today on the show, we're going to look at 5 different top 50 United States think tanks and look at the top stories from each one of their websites. To begin the show, the Brookings Institution calls our attention to the Universal Day of the Child on November 20th, the same date marking the UN General Assembly's adoption of the Declaration of the Rights of the Child in 1959 and the Convention on the Rights of the Child in 1989. The latter, the most widely ratified international human rights treaty, sets forth children's right to life, health, education, play, the right to family life, protection from violence, to not be discriminated, and have their views heard. This year, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon stressed especially those suffering the impacts of poverty, armed conflict, discrimination, and exploitation, while emphasizing the importance of ensuring that the commitments made by the international community to the world's children are extended to a group of children who are often forgotten or overlooked, those deprived of their liberty. Among those most vulnerable are the nearly 50 million children defined as those under the age of 18 who are refugees or migrants, and their numbers have risen by 77% in the last 5 years. Uprooted from their homes, 28 million are displaced children. Nearly 11 million of them are refugees who have left their countries. 1 million await asylum, and a further 17 million are internally displaced within their countries. Another 20 million are child migrants who have fled their homes due to extreme poverty, gang violence, or other factors. As noted by UNICEF, all are at a particular risk of abuse and detention because they have no documentation, have uncertain legal status, and there is no systematic tracking and monitoring of their well-being. Children are falling through the cracks. Anti-Slavery International notes that aside from sexual exploitation, children are often trafficked into forced labor in agriculture, domestic servitude, as well as criminality and forced begging. These are difficult issues to confront, but the plight of refugee children, especially the unaccompanied, needs a concerted effort with better coordination between humanitarian, government, security, and development agencies, as well as non-governmental organizations. UNICEF calls for prioritizing their asylum applications, making every effort to reunite children with their families, prevent their detention, especially in adult centers, and the strict application of non-refoulement prohibiting deportation to countries where they might face human rights violations or be denied health, education, and protection from trafficking. This is certainly something to reflect upon on Universal Children's Day. And we're going to make that our hashtag for today with the hashtag Universal Children's Day. We will continue to make that our hashtag on November 20th as that day comes to help spread awareness and advocate for this Universal Children's Day. Now next, we do have a couple articles on President Trump today, but they're not condescending about his election. They're just more or less looking into the future of America and what's going to happen. So bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. Next, President-elect Trump has said that he plans to declare China a currency manipulator on day one. Now, Brad Setzer from the Council on Foreign Relations is among those who think this is a bad idea. This isn't the right time to signal that China's long-standing exchange rate management has crossed over the line and become manipulation. If China responded by ending all exchange rate management, no daily fix, no band, no intervention, a true float, the renminbi would certainly fall and potentially fall by a lot. Now, there currently seems to be a bit of confusion about what it takes for the Treasury to name China a manipulator and what a designation of manipulation means. Well, the 1988 Act empowers the Treasury to name a country as a manipulator. The Secretary of the Treasury shall analyze on an annual basis the exchange rate policies of foreign countries in consultation with the International Monetary Fund and consider whether countries manipulate the rate of exchange between their currency and the United States dollar for purposes of preventing effective balance of payments adjustments or gaining unfair competitive advantage in international trade. However, the 1988 Act doesn't authorize any specific sanctions that follow from naming a country a manipulator, only the initiation of negotiations with the named country. Manipulation is a label, nothing more. So right now, if Donald Trump does label China a currency manipulator, there's really nothing else more that comes with that label. It's just a label you're slapping on China, and then the initiation of negotiations follow. But as of right now, that's all that happens when you do label somebody a currency manipulator. But we'll keep an eye on that and see once it gets closer to Inauguration Day to see if President-elect Donald Trump follows through with his rhetoric of labeling Chinese a currency manipulator on day one. Now, next, we'll stay with Donald Trump for just one more story. This Thursday, President-elect Donald J. Trump is scheduled to meet with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan in New York City. The American Enterprise Institute has 4 things for President-elect Trump to know. First, Mr. Abe is going to be the only Japanese leader you will know until re-election time. He is the most successful Japanese politician since perhaps the 1960s, serving since 2012 after a disastrous one-year stint as premier in 2006 and 2007. Now, after 3 straight electoral victories, his ruling Liberal Democratic Party, the LDP, has changed its rules to allow him to run for a third 3-year term. As he is the leader of the world's third largest economy and hosts the majority of our forces in the Pacific, Trump's relationship with him will shape foreign economic and security policies. Second, Mr. Abe is your most eager partner in Asia, as evidenced by his desire to meet you as soon as possible. Despite occasional remarks that raise doubts over his views about Japan's wartime actions, he has made clear both his contrition for the war and, more importantly, his support for democracy and the open, rules-based order in Asia. Third, Abe is not merely talking the talk, he's walking the walk. He has increased Japan's defense spending each year since returning to office. The current budget stands at approximately $50 billion, which places it behind only the United States, China, the United Kingdom, Russia, and France. Fourth, this is the best opportunity in a generation to increase trade with Japan, which can play an important role in getting America's economy moving again. Japan is the second largest foreign investor in America after the UK, with over $370 billion in 2015. Moreover, Japanese companies based in the United States employ over 700,000 Americans, most in high-paying, skilled jobs. So we wish the best of luck to Trump as he has his first meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister. This looks like it's going to be a very important meeting for the future of the United States, a very good meeting. Looks like a lot of good things are going to happen if Trump approaches it the right way. So these 4 things are what the American Enterprise Institute wanted the president-elect to know, and hopefully he already knows this or can hear about it and realizes this is what he needs to do. Now, next, the New America Foundation takes us to Minnesota, where new education policies are in favor of immigrants. 1 in 6 school-age Minnesotans has at least one immigrant parent, and 1 in 5 Minnesotans under 5 years old is a child of immigrants. This trend is a part of a new significant shift in the state's racial and ethnic makeup over the past 25 years. A new report from New America's Dual Language Learners National Work Group looks at Minnesota's redesign of policies and practices to better support the education of this significant population. In the paper, Pluralism on the Prairie, Helping Minnesota's Dual Language Learners Leap Forward, senior researcher Connor P. Williams identifies key lessons for states eager to follow Minnesota's path, while also avoiding some of its pitfalls. The state's primary reform on behalf of these children, the Learning for English Academic Proficiency and Success Act, passed in 2014 and created state policies that focus on supporting dual language learners' academic success. Minnesota's policies stemming from the LEAPS Act, the Learning for English Academic Proficiency and Success Act, are some of the most comprehensive, research-based, and forward-thinking in the United States, says Williams in the report. LEAPS aims to improve how schools identify these students and how teachers target them with high-quality language services. However, Williams notes that the mere existence of policies that prioritize dual language learners is no guarantee they will be carried out. In the past 2 years, initial moves have been made to implement the law, but some observers, advocates, and policymakers note that significant actions haven't been taken to match initial enthusiasm around the act. Full implementation of the LEAPS Act would make it more likely that these dual language learners will reach full English proficiency while retaining their native language abilities, says Williams. These students would be more likely to succeed throughout their academic careers and would provide the state with a highly skilled workforce that also happens to be multilingual and multicultural. So although this act hasn't been really acted upon, it hasn't been put into action really or enforced in Minnesota, this is a policy in the right direction. What a great idea to help immigrants here in the United States first stay with their native language and their native culture, but also to learn English so they can live here in America, in the United States. That way, you have a whole workforce or a whole generation of people that are multicultural and multilingual. That's outstanding, and that's exactly what America needs. So we hope all of the states here in the United States look at Minnesota's example and look at this LEAPS Act and consider taking in something similar and enforcing it as well. So again, we'll keep our eye on it and see if anything comes of it. Now, ending the show with Human Rights Watch, we have a saddening update from Mosul. Militiamen, Iraqi security forces, and civilians mutilated and dragged the bodies of at least 5 dead fighters of the Islamic State in the Iraqi town of Qayyara on October 3rd. Now, anti-ISIS fighters anti-ISIS fighters have executed at least one ISIS fighter after he surrendered. The Iraqi government should control its own forces and hold them accountable if it hopes to claim the moral upper hand in its fight against ISIS, said Lama Faqih, Deputy Middle East Director at Human Rights Watch. The failure to hold commanders and abusers to account does not bode well for the looming battle inside Mosul. Mutilation of corpses is a war crime, as is killing captured combatants or civilians. A local resident gave Human Rights Watch a series of 13 videos he said were filmed by a local 24-year-old Mutilated fighter on that day. The first video shows at least 10 fighters in a gun battle with ISIS forces in the desert outside the town. Based on their uniforms and information from the fighter who made the videos, Human Rights Watch determined that they included Mutilated fighters and Iraqi soldiers. Now, in the video, one fighter grabs the corpse of a killed ISIS fighter, kicks it in the face, and spits on it. Another one steps on the body and poses for a photo. The cameraman, travels past 2 more corpses on the ground, and as he approaches a fourth, a man in military uniform with a special forces badge on his shoulder calls for a razor, saying that he wants the head of the dead fighter. The government should not stand idly by while fighters commit atrocities in its name, Faqih said. Political, security, and judicial officials should work together transparently to establish the truth about any abuses that take place in the course of this battle. So again, ladies and gentlemen, in Mosul, in Iraq, where all this fighting is happening, unfortunately, they have some footage of Iraqi forces and some of the joined forces who are fighting ISIS. They dismember and unfortunately degrade these corpses of ISIS fighters. And although, yes, you can say they deserved it, they did it to them, they've done it to American soldiers, you can say all of that. But it's a war crime. It's international law. It's essentially a norm that you're not supposed to desecrate a corpse, whether it be an ISIS fighter or an American soldier. That's just something you do not do. Now, ladies and gentlemen, help us spread advocacy today for the Universal Children's Day with the hashtag Universal Children's Day. You can find all these articles and the links directly to the articles on the respective websites below in the description. I encourage you to click on the links and go check out the articles in their entirety. But thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. When you go look at the description for the links for the articles, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way you get notified every time a new video is posted. Give us a like on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. But thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I was your host, Bryce Dolan.